I don't want to kill you, Piper. I just want to find out the truth.
Well, how do we help you find that?
Like this.
So, we're doing a Season 8 episode. No, that wasn't sarcastic excitement. And if you're new here, I'll have to ask you to make sure there's a fainting couch nearby, because I actually quite like Season 8. Dare I say, I even quite love it.
And if wanting children and enlightenment and Leo back makes us selfish, then I'm guilty.
My favourite episodes from this season are of course the two-part finale, but this one was always a high contender, even if its title's pun makes it very hard to say verbally.
What are we arguing about?
The ultimate power, what else?
Named The Jung and the Restless, but Jung with a J after Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, who was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, this episode of course is about the psychological, at least as it pertains to the Charmed Ones.
Okay, but I just don't think I'm ready for this right now.
Better get ready.
This is the home stretch, building towards the end of the series, where the sisters have known for a while that the Triad from Season 3 have returned, and put in a contingency plan they instated years ago, in case demons wouldn't be able to defeat them.
Rather than looking for more demons, they recruited powerful witches, just like you. And perhaps even more importantly, powerful sisters.
2 witch sisters, whose mother was without powers because her magic skipped a generation, with magic comparable to the Charmed Ones, dubbed the ultimate power. One was kidnapped 15 years ago and raised among demons, while the other's magic only awakened recently. The second turns out to be none other than Billie Jenkins, who the Charmed Ones have been mentoring for the past year.
Billie is a friend, a person. That's what makes it all the more insidious.
On finding her kidnapped sister Christy, she was convinced to turn on the Halliwells and be the one to finally take them down. Or at least that's the theory, because Billie is incredibly conflicted.
This really is destined.
It is.
Well, then it should be written somewhere.
Although she sided with Christy, she doesn't believe that the sisters are actually evil.
They're good people, Christy. They've helped hundreds of innocents. Not lately, they haven't.
The feeling is actually mutual among at least one Halliwell, as Phoebe wants to try and talk to Billie to smooth things over.
Look, Billie, we're not the bad guys here.
Well, she thinks you are.
Piper is much more mercenary, however, since Leo had to be taken away to protect him from dying in the crossfire of the final battle, and she sees killing Billie and Christy as a chance to get him back.
You know what? I'm tired of everybody using that against me like it diminishes my credibility or something, because it doesn't.
Well, you must admit it's probably clouding your judgment just a little bit.
Paige is undecided, since she's now juggling 3 roles in Witch, Wife, and Whitelighter, and she's got a troublesome charge she has to protect from Darklighters. Oh, and as an aside, Mikkel's line here?
It's a little early for that, don't you think? It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
I've been saying that for years and forgot that's where I got it from. Christy decides that the best way to convince Billie that the sisters have to be stopped is to put them into a deep sleep, where Billie can see their inner desires, which of course won't be saving innocence or fighting evil.
Billie, if I am wrong, we'll leave them alone just like I promised. But if I'm not...
I know.
While I will say one critical thing about Season 8 in the Ultimate Power storyline, and it being that Billie turns on the sisters incredibly suddenly in the Torn Identity, I can't deny that the last 5 episodes and build up to the finale is suitably epic and one of my favourite parts. Not just this season, the whole show.
Billie, we're all on the same side here.
Are we?
Since the budget probably didn't allow for Marnette Patterson to be in more episodes, Christy turning Billie to her side was initially just an exercise in getting from point A to point B, but I feel like this episode does a good job at bridging that gap.
Look, maybe they're just as confused about all of this as we are.
I'm not confused.
Well, I am.
This is an enemy unlike the Charmed Ones have faced in the past. Since the likes of Cole and Gideon were unknown villains, and already about to cause harm when they had to be stopped. Billie and Christy, meanwhile, haven't actually done anything yet, and the conflict comes from what they might do in Fate. And their ultimate enemy isn't a demon, warlock, or other evil being, but a human who has not only been nothing but good up until now, but was essentially like a sister to them as well. It also brings Billie into conflict with her eternal search for family, where she has to choose between the only blood relative she has left and the women who became like her sisters. What did Phoebe say at the end of Hocus Pocus?
We think of you as part of the family now.
Phoebe naturally is the one most willing to reach out to Billie and try to find some common ground, even though Piper and Christy are like,
any ground I found with you would indeed be common.
Billie and Phoebe's friendship was something that always spoke to me even from the first watch. And for all the complaints about Phoebe's selfishness that get overblown after season 7, which we will get to, She puts on hold her love life and search for that future daughter to try and help a friend.
And I think we should help her, not hurt her.
Part of what Phoebe's derailment boiled down to in seasons 5 and 6 is losing her compassion for people most in need of it. Most obviously Cole. Having compassion for Billie goes a bit south here, but it ultimately pays off in the finale, when Billie's attempts to salvage things with Christy lead to her realizing how she was tricked. And you could argue that she remembers Phoebe's compassion and seeks the sisters out to try and save things. Phoebe is also the one shown to be trusting her to take care of her daughters in a scene in the epilogue, but before she can get to that point, Phoebe's compassion has its limits.
So now you're worried about Billie and Christy.
Well, yeah, I mean, I may be an optimist, but I'm not stupid.
Part of the sadness that hangs over this episode is how Phoebe begins it feeling conflicted and outright reluctant to treat Billie and Christy as enemies, but the ending shows that she's changed her mind completely. And you could also argue that Christy, and most likely Domain, who'll be introduced in the next episode, was banking on this. After all, Billie and the Charmed Ones finding a common ground and resolving things without killing each other would go against the Triad's plan. So Christy's dream spell doesn't just convince Billie that the sisters are selfish, actually, but it also serves to put even more of a divide between them.
I'd say we've done enough, and that doesn't make us evil.
Well, I think it does from Billie and Christy's point of view.
Thanks to Christy, Phoebe no longer wants to reach out and try to sway Billie back to their side. She's alienated both sides completely by the end, and she's crafty with the dream spell. She doesn't try to kill the sisters while they're unconscious because there is still 3 episodes to go, but also because she isn't strong enough to do it herself, and if she makes a hostile move against them while Billie is still reluctant, well, she's down the ally she needs to get the job done. It's a way of extending the conflict so it doesn't get resolved until the finale, and it's done in a way that works for me.
You promise not to hurt them, right?
Not until you see what you need to see.
The Dream Universe explores the sisters' deepest wishes at the moment, which for Phoebe is discovering that she wants Coop to be the father of her kids.
I don't want him, obviously, because even if I did, I couldn't have him.
The Torn Identity had hinted that Coop was falling for Phoebe even though he was supposedly sent to set her up with her perfect match, and it's this episode that shows Phoebe feeling the same way. Yes, this pairing is rushed, and yes, they had to resort to telling us he was her perfect match in the finale, but I dig it. They are a good match.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Victor Webster has some nice chemistry that makes him feel like someone who knows Phoebe very well and can understand her, as well as providing the kind of support a Charmed One needs when she's about to deal with a dangerous enemy.
I just don't think Billie and Christy see it that way.
It doesn't matter.
And since Phoebe doesn't want something whirlwind or superficial, but rather someone she can build a life and family with, it shows that Coop could be that guy. Movies and TV shows with their romance plots tend to only show the physical attraction, devil's tango and the passionate declarations of love, then splitting a couple up the second a complication comes along, and sometimes derailing the partner's characterization out of nowhere, or else dragging out the will they won't they tension until the end. It's still pretty rare to see a couple who get together and stay together, despite problems that everyone has, and working on building a life together. Joss Whedon said that happy people make for boring television, hence Willow and Kennedy being the only relationship to survive the on-screen Buffyverse, and why writers splitting a couple up is an easy way for them to add drama, which Charmed was guilty of too, but at least, even if this pairing is rushed, they bypass the physical attraction and focus on emotional connection and understanding, which is what Phoebe needs the most. And again, for all the complaints that she's selfish, her arc towards the end of the series is actually that she's neglecting herself to focus on the ultimate power, and the purpose of this dream is to show her what she could have once the final battle is over. But segueing onto the actual long-running couple that built a life together, Piper's inner conflict is the reverse of Phoebe's, in that she's neglecting everything else in favor of her man.
Well, at least you have a husband. I'm still trying to get mine back.
We've seen this time and again whenever Piper suffers a loss or a betrayal, and she ends up becoming more mercenary and dehumanizing her enemies. She did that to Phoebe herself after she became Queen of the Underworld, and now Billie is the target of that.
Look, sooner or later you two are gonna realize that it's us or them, and I for one would like to be ready.
We get confirmation from Future Wire that she's supposed to become an optimist in later life, and her elderly self we meet in the finale is a very sweet grandmother, and so I see this as the crossroads between Piper holding onto that fight response that's very reminiscent of Prue, and adopting that more optimistic standpoint.
Since when did you become the big sister?
Since you stopped acting like one.
Piper's pessimism drives the wedge between the Charmed Ones and the ultimate power even further, with how she makes a potion to potentially kill Billie and Christy, and she refuses to listen to Phoebe's suggestion that they can bring Billie round. And Phoebe is eventually proved right when Billie makes that face turn and everyone gets their happily ever after, except Christy of course. And a moment I didn't expect to tear up during was Piper's dream of seeing a house full of grandchildren and an elderly version of Leo.
Leo?
Everyone had been talking about Leo as though he were almost an object to get back, or a goal to reach. But this sequence reminds the audience that this is a woman whose life feels like it's falling apart around her, and all she wants is to have her husband by her side.
Save me.
The choice to use Gordon Wells instead of Brian Krause is obviously due to budget restrictions, but kind of works from a narrative standpoint. Piper can't have Leo back right now, and they can only be together in her dreams, so using a different actor gives that little twist of the heart, and therefore more power to when they finally do reunite.
Battle is over. Though not as I expected.
The first time Piper had to let a human enemy die, Leo was the one to comfort her. And there's something very subtly tragic about how, when she'll possibly have to do it again, all she can have is a fantasy version of him.
Whatever it takes.
Paige's dream about finding enlightenment calls back to the arc that started at the beginning of the season, where she was the one most dissatisfied with the new identities, and how she didn't know who she was outside of being headmistress of magic school. A situation she was forced into and was content to leave to Leo.
The search for self is a noble one.
Paige is the only half-sister and half-whitelighter in the trio, and one who grew up adopted, spends the whole series looking for her sense of self and how she exists in two different worlds. While she had started getting charges in Season 7, she repeatedly had trouble fully embracing her whitelighter side, which made up the plot of the Lost Picture show.
I think there's room for both of you in my life.
In this episode, she's juggling a charge in danger with witch stuff, and prioritizing the latter, which Billie sees firsthand in the dream. But she gets her resolution when she realizes Mikkel is in danger, and snaps out of the dream before the other two. Oh, and catch this line?
Why can't I dream about somebody cool, like, I don't know, Quentin Tarantino?
Rose McGowan was filming Death Proof around the same time, so that's what that's all about.
Sorry, I'm built like a girl, not a black man.
You could also argue that Paige's problem embracing her whitelighter side is what allowed Billie to be manipulated by Christy so easily.
Especially hard on me. Geez, she used to be my charge.
Perhaps the thing that convinces Billie that Christy has a point is in seeing Paige outright dismiss a charge's call for help to chase her inner truth. And she lets Paige out of the spell to allow her to help Mikkel. And it makes for a sweet scene where it turns out the good Mikkel was destined to do as a whitelighter is healing Paige, and therefore facilitating the Charmed Ones taking down the ultimate power.
You were right. I was meant for something special. And I think I just did it.
Now, since Billie is basically the extra Charmed one in Season 8, this episode focuses on her as well, and her being conflicted between the Halliwells and Christy. But notice the part she plays in the dream world.
What are you gonna do, blow me up again like last time?
Last time?
At Christy's instruction, she has to pretend to be innocent and merely a figment of their imaginations to get what she wants out of them.
Look, I'm not the bad guy here, okay? As much as you want to demonize me, I am not the problem.
It looks as though Christy's manipulation skills are rubbing off on her. And speaking of Christy, this episode is probably where she's the most effective as an antagonist.
I feel like I walked out on my family. I know, but they're not your family, Billie. They never were.
Marnette Patterson's strengths lie more in playing the devil on the shoulder, rather than the sadist out for violence. And this episode is her strongest performance.
They used you. I just don't believe that. It's because you don't want to believe that.
It's this scene in Magic School that sells me on this arc. Christy knowing how to prey on Billie's insecurities, twist the truth around, and get her on her side.
I mean, after you trusted them and you befriended them, you were betrayed.
It's in moments like this where I get reminded of my same interpretation of Abigail from The Crucible, a villain who believes their own lies and succeeds because they simply cannot accept any other's perspective.
I'm just not ready to do that. I can't. Well, you have to get ready. We both do.
Marnette Patterson said that she and Kaylee Cuoco gelled instantly and had chemistry, and in scenes like this, it's very easy to buy the two as sisters.
I mean, they're supposed to be the charmed ones, Billie, not you.
On a superficial level, I just love how this episode is shot. The majority of praise goes to the dream sequences, which are done much more preferably to when Season 5 had an episode centered around them. They're lit with a soft blue tint and given this filter that immediately makes the whole thing very engaging to me. The two scenes between Billie and Christy in Magic School likewise are shot and lit in a very nice way. The second one really serves to help the melancholy feeling that hangs over this episode, creating a sense of dread that this is the calm before the storm.
They lost the way. Are you ready to see that?
And the last scene where the living room is decorated with all these candles. Just visual touches that I can appreciate. And hopefully this will refute some accusations that no effort was put into Season 8.
Maybe Billie's right. Maybe we are selfish.
No, wanting a life doesn't make us selfish, it makes us normal.
This video ended up being longer than usual, likely because I'm on the defensive here as one of the people who enjoy Season 8 and the Ultimate Power storyline, so I got lots more to talk about and hopefully convince other people on why that is.
It's not wrong for them to want what they want.
It is when they've got the kind of powers they do.
It seems to be a thing with me, where Season 7 of Buffy is actually my third favourite, knowing it gets very little love from the fans, and the equally unpopular 6 is my second. But of course, I trot out my unpopular opinions to own them, and take the stand to defend them in whatever court I've conjured up in this now very mixed metaphor. So to summarise, great visual style that shows you don't need a budget to make things look interesting at least, a character study that gives us time to look deep within the show's protagonists and what makes them tick one last time before the grand finale, and a solid progression of the arc that takes us into the endgame. And on my first watch, it made me, dare I say, restless for the finale.
We're gonna stop them. Before they stop us.